Hi folks, my name is Kelvin, and last month in Belfast at the Northern Ireland Developer Conference, I was to give a talk, but I couldn't because I was very sick and I actually lost my voice on the day. So I'm making this recording to first apologize to all the folks involved at NIDC for selecting the talk and all the organization, the great efforts that went to put on a great day for everyone, and to thank the folks involved, especially Garth Gilmore for their support on the day, and just to make the recording to share as I was going to with my slides on the day. So without further ado, please enjoy a map of the Greenfield and lessons learned on leading the way. Okay, let's see if we can do it in one take. I want to start with a nostalgic image for some of the older folks in the audience as I talk through the Greenfield and software. This idea of starting a project from scratch, building a foundation for the very first time, it's an opportunity that we yearn for because it's this limitless potential to apply our craft because we're not spoilt or constrained by legacy. All of the wrongs or the weird things that we've encountered in the past, we can correct those, and critically, we can document the how and the why that so many projects often don't do. Now, in the earlier days of my career, I would stand up in front of leadership and show images like this naive view without regarding the needs or the challenges of the business, but focus solely on the challenges the engineering aspect faces, to say that we are in an untenable position, we cannot maintain, we cannot build, we cannot support any developments because we just need to start again, and we promise that we'll get it right. Now, in the last 18 months, an opportunity arrived for me to start and work on a Greenfield project, which is really exciting until the caveat is that I would be the tech lead. So now we're talking about unprecedented levels of imposter syndrome, because while we're working on a Greenfield project, everybody's going to be looking at what I'm doing. I'm going to carry this hesitation because I think there's going to be this focus on me, on all my actions, and what if I get it wrong. So I want to introduce myself. I'm Kelvin. I'm a tech lead in Instill, and I've been in the industry for over 7 years, where my focus has been solely on mobile, on iOS, Android, and more recently on mixed and virtual reality. I got into the industry from an art school background because I was really excited about my Windows Phone, but I was a little bit too late to come in there and actually make a change. So the focus there was native apps and native experiences for me. And I work for a sponsor for Instill, sponsor of the event NIDC, where we're all about helping the world's top innovators bring the future to market. Whether that's maintaining a competitive edge on building on top of what exists that a company has as a software solution, or in the example of today, is setting a foundation for years to come. That's the type of work that we do. And at the start there, I mentioned about the naive view of business needs and engineering needs and not having awareness or sympathy about what business needs are. And still is where I learned that difference and that maintaining that balance about engineering excellence and quality, but maintaining that balance to ensure businesses can succeed because they can actually get to market in time. And the project I'm talking through today is from the folks at ESO, who very kindly permitted me to go into detail about the work they've been doing together. ESO's mission is improving community health and safety through the power of data, which is building user-friendly software to meet the changing needs of EMS agencies, fire departments, hospitals, and so forth. So ESO approached us with this need where their users were looking for a different experience for their app called Electronic Health Record. This is a tool for paramedics to document patient data on scene, reliably gathering patient conditions and the treatment that they're providing. So taking that approach, that process from scene to treatment to hospital and any follow-up needs to dramatically improve care outcomes. This is a Windows and web-based experience in North America primarily today. So this is something we really can't mess up because it's a domain that's critically important. If we get it wrong, it could have very dire consequences. So this experience in Windows and web, what does it look like in iOS? The last 18 months, it looks something like this, where we built something from the ground up, a native iOS app, performant, secure, with the latest tooling and critically guidance that we have received directly from Apple. Oh, and of course, it wouldn't be an iOS app if it didn't have a beautiful dark mode as well. Now, One of the favorite, maybe not a compliment, but a comment that I received from someone in the past year about this app is that it looks like a settings app. And that might not really be regarded as a compliment. I'm not sure that it was, but I take that as a view that we have been able collaboratively to distill an extremely challenging domain into something so simple, so approachable, that future generations of healthcare providers will be able to immediately grasp it, to understand how to use it. And I regard that as a huge success for all of us together. And I want to talk just in this space about an experience of mine earlier in the year, at the start of the year, where I had to call a paramedic for my mum. Paramedics and anybody who works in emergency services, they have this superpower where they just can walk into a room and immediately, without really doing anything, they just put us at ease. And the patients that the paramedics I witnessed on this day, with the knowledge of the domain that I've been working in, was really quite something. Because I saw them work across a tablet, and then an iPhone, and then this old school netbook looking thing, bending the screen back and forth, trying to take this really low quality picture, and a very disjointed experience where at the very end, after taking a blood pressure readout print, they just start writing in the back to say, what conditions do you have? What medications are you on? It's such a disjointed experience. So there is so much potential to improve something like this. But again, all the more scary if we get it wrong. And as I said there, we worked very closely with Apple on this, over to the folks there at the Battersea HQ in London, where we continually got repeat technical and UX guidance. If you're sitting around the table at Apple, it's every bit as cool as it is frightening, because it's peak imposter mode. But one of the things from that I really like to call out is two really powerful questions that the folks at Apple ask of you. The first one is why? Why does this have to work the way it is? Challenging some of the constraints, some of the technical boundaries or limitations that may be established about what a user's expectation might need. So rather than just porting lots of core concepts, it was an opportunity for us to sit back and, with a wider picture, what can we improve and what can we drastically change given the time. The second one was user-centric in the case of, what do your users think about this feature that you're prototyping, that you're building, and always keeping the user as central focus. Because at the end of the day, this is a tool for paramedics to be able to do their job with the best outcomes possible for patients. So, as part of being a tech lead and leading the way, earlier in the year I was asked, what do you do? Which is a strange question to get, because you often don't really think about it that way, at least I don't. And the reason I was asked this is because I was going on a sabbatical for 2 months, which I would strongly recommend. But whenever I think about, as an engineer, the sort of work that I would do, through the last 7 years, for a lot of it, being an engineer is just grabbing tickets off the board, getting on with the work, talking about concerns, getting a little bit more confident, and maybe taking on documentation of core features, carrying core features through and taking ownership of those. But the actual leading and the overall higher level direction of things, that was always somebody else's responsibility, something that somebody else would do until now, where it was on me. So a tech lead, I had to put together a list of what I actually do to help the team continue and to keep the project going as smooth as possible. So putting a list of what I do and managing the expectation supporting, I struggled to put together a list of these terms. So I came up with something like this. All these high level but quite abstract terms that didn't really mean much. There was a lot of, like a couple of paragraphs under each. So you're doing a lot of other things and not always doing actual development. But whenever I step back, and if I had to quickly describe, just tell me exactly what you do, it would be something like representing engineering and being a reliable representative of that. Regardless of the fact that we're working as an external third party, as a tech lead, you'll need to be somebody that's approachable, that people can rely on, and represent the efforts of your engineering team and protect them where you can from distractions and from going off course. But for your peers in product design and for any stakeholder, it's about earning that trust and coming through for people repeatedly so they can depend on you, and then you can have that relationship of working together to help move things along. So I've talked a little bit about myself, about the project, and what I did was I put together some key lessons that for the last year and a half would have been good to have at the very beginning, but these are the sort of lessons you have to go through and learn from experience. And I want to stress that these are more behavioral than they are technical. So please don't think that this is going to be a lot of mobile stuff that I don't know, or I don't work in this domain, so I don't think it'll be useful to me. That's absolutely not the case. And I would also like to stress that it's a work in progress. So beginning with the first lesson, which is getting ready for a change. If you're somebody who has come into a leadership role as a tech lead, you're probably going to want to think, well, all of the value that I've been able to provide as an engineer in my career so far has been in the ID generally. So you're working in here, you're thinking this is where I can do the most work in Xcode in our experience. But the fact is, whenever you're pulled away from this and you're that key contact, that key representative, you should not see being pulled away as a bad thing, because folks are getting your time, they're depending on you, they're looking for answers. There's a whole lot of risks that we immediately need to address and work through as we start into a Greenfield project. But that would be the same for any project. So don't see being pulled out of the ID as this being pulled away from your ability to provide value, because that's for the wider team and that's a balance to share. But don't start with that attitude, because that adjustment and getting ready for that change was quite key. Now, I don't need to be convinced about the value of documentation, because I'm one of these rare breeds engineers that actually likes documenting a lot. And I would say that whenever it comes to documenting, in the short term to mid-term, it's probably going to be one of your best friends, because nobody has time to go through and read all of your stuff, no matter how nicely you put it together and how nicely you document it, because they're just going to ask you directly. The value long term there, of course, will be historical, the why, but in the short term, rely on this for the reasons, as I said, to help represent and get answers quickly for folks. Now, moving on to lesson 2 is just getting this balance of planning and how iterating fast iterations will beat this idea of getting a perfect plan together. As I said before, there is this wealth of risk at the very beginning, especially in a Greenfield, that there's just a little bit of anxiety that we're all carrying, because we're excited at the potential of what we can achieve, but it's making those early moves and just stressing over the details of trying to make sure that we hit it off in the right mark. Because by discussing that risk and mitigating that risk early, that gives us the confidence to progress. And one of the mistakes that I learned was just trying to line up everything perfectly, get everything in order before we started to get through and actually get on with feature development, which for us was a very early proof of concept where we had to rapidly spike out. But the actual process of making sure everything was in gear and we were confident to make those very first commits, that's where the anxiety was. And really, the best thing to do is just spikes, proving out, isolating what the key risks are, and just working to a relatively rough degree to quickly mitigate those concerns, which can then be fed back to a more robust foundation, rather than agonizing over every little detail at the very beginning because you think you want to build this thing perfectly, which of course is a balance. But mitigation and combating those risks early starts to feed more confidence in for everybody, stakeholders and developers alike, what you need at those very early stages to help you work through that. And now for lesson 3 is the idea that your team is your superpower, and this is one that I learned, because whenever you empower your team, they're going to be able to go on and do extraordinary things. So the team that we had was over 7 engineers at its peak. And for me, from the experience that I had coming up over the years, I had a lot of trust afforded to me, a lot of risks that I was allowed to take on, and I was trusted to stumble, to get things wrong, and to be mentored and refine that experience and take that back to be a better overall engineer. And I want to afford exactly that to the rest of my team. But as a tech lead, I'm wanting to just agonize over everything, and I had this idea that every potential fire, every little problem that could go on, that could happen, I needed to jump on that, and I needed to take care of that, and I'll protect everybody and mitigate those potential risks, which is exhausting, but also doesn't afford a lot of trust. So trying to jump on and take ownership and responsibility of everything isn't something you should do, because it doesn't afford enough space for other engineers, especially if they're more junior, the confidence or showing the trust that they can actually stumble a little bit too. So you're better creating that environment that supports that growth, that trial and error approach. Because I want to call out two of the interns that we actually had on our team through earlier this year. Now, these are interns who went back to university. They're completing their final years now. And it's, you're getting this right whenever, not just on you, but on the wider team, establishing and maintaining this trust. Because they're very shy to begin with. And at Instill, we don't assign our interns like specific jobs, like documentation or writing some tests, and that's the limit of what they can do. There's just another engineer in the team afforded every bit of trust and respect that we all have for each other. So they're taking on features, taking on spite works, an opportunity to learn, to gain confidence and present back not just to the team but other stakeholders, and that allows them to grow into exceptional contributors. And that is the environment that you set the foundations of trust, that if you can stumble and you can fail at something and be open about it, that affords that the rest of the team can too. So that's quite critical to success. And just on the team mindset, I want to call out that attitude is contagious. So keeping this balance of positivity and being mindful about how both you carry yourself and how you might carry the rest of the team as well. Let me give you the example that you come out of a meeting or a presentation that didn't go as planned, or there's a change of schedule. If something is good enough for you to nag on, to rant about, or to take an approach that isn't proactive about how, rather than just complain about something, if you don't say, this is how we can improve it, that sets a standard for everybody else. So if it's good enough for you to nag on, it's good enough for everybody else. So you need to set the positives and look for the outcomes. But you also need to get this balance, because you don't want this idea of toxic positivity where everything's great, everything's fine, we don't need to improve everything, and just, we'll get on with things and we'll be fine. Because that degrades the potential trust that the rest of the team can have in you to sympathize with some of the issues that you can have. And that can be everything from how we might come out of a meeting to the standard of our tooling, the problems that we might have there, to our CI and our ability to iterate and bring value back. So this balance that you need to get. You don't want to be too negative about something. You don't want to be positive as well, too positive as well. But you want to always post-fix it with, if there is a problem, what can we do about it today? Let's just set aside the current sprint that we're in, the current timelines. Let's just have a chat to see where can we make a start to improve or challenge something that's maybe been a bit difficult for us. And that makes better outcomes for everybody. And that, again, builds on top of that trust I talked about in the previous point. Now, on to lesson 5, foundations over frameworks, because trendy tools matter less than lasting impact. A successful Greenfield project needs a very strong foundation, because it needs that long-term viability and clear architecture planning to be a success for years to come. Now, something about working in iOS, and maybe this is a little bit more mobile oriented, is we are spoiled with how slick presentations that Apple put together every WWDC, where it fills you with enthusiasm to try the latest things, because the attention to detail, both in how they're presented and the APIs, is really quite something. And we're in the unique space that we don't have to support older versions of iOS. We can use the latest and greatest as it comes out, making it potentially faster than ever to iterate it through. But the challenge here was, while we were making decision records about why we were using this testing framework or this database and such, that's a detail that you're getting lost in more so. And one of the failures I made there was not reinforcing more about the architecture and being able to think about how those things are going to play out longer term, from how API calls are being established and how database is going to work, and all those sort of lower level challenges that working at frameworks isn't going to solve. What's going to solve and mitigate that is just getting together in a whiteboard and just drawing things out. And as a tech lead, one of the mistakes that I made is thinking that this responsibility is wholly on me. I will not go to the team and collaborate with them. I will feel like I have to sit down and think about how to solve these problems, because again, this goes back to the idea of protecting them from potential problems or something difficult. Whenever you internalize something like that, you make it very stressful. So the solution is to get work together with your peers and just have a brainstorming session and help feed into that process, because it's more collaborative, it builds more trust, and it's going to result in a better product. Because if you don't do this and you rely on your frameworks, what you get into is like a reactive architecture that you're constantly trying to mitigate around because it's not clearly enough defined. And then for a closing lesson is about staying organized, because what chaos can do to a team. As an engineer in the earlier days, I would just throw notes into a file and forget about it. But now, whenever I was doing that, I have to go back and then decipher what I was actually saying, what actions I would possibly take. And I'll give you an example. In the very early days, every day was kind of like this, where you know you have something or many things to do, but you don't know all of them. You don't know what's the most important. And before you can blink, you've got a million more things. What feels like a million more things coming your way. And you just get overwhelmed. So what do? You just spend more time. But the quality of that time is poor. So you need to revisit how you actually put together your notes and draw your actions and your outcomes and document them as a result. It's not about the tooling that you use, it's the process and approach. Because I've tried all like different types of these tooling, and they all work differently, and you'll find a fit that works for you. But as I said, it's the process. And this doesn't mean putting it into Jira and formalizing it in such a way, because as a tech lead, there's a lot of stuff that you do that is not represented in Jira, which at times can make you feel like an imposter, but it's the background work that helps keep things moving smoothly. So why I term it this idea of taking that chaos, that frantic feeling of being overwhelmed, and making it explicit outcomes, these check boxes. This is one of the most impactful things that I was actually able to do. And it really looks something as simple as this. This idea that we've had a talk about something, or I have a catch up with some folks later during the week or the next week. What are the things that I need to do? Take a moment, that extra moment, rather than just throw some notes together. What are the outcomes? How can I subtask that down to know that I've satisfied an outcome or an objective that maybe is a request or isn't represented on Jira? And being able to start my day, glance at this and know what's left, or what's the context around some of the actions that's maybe just a bullet point. This retooling of my approach is something that made the quality of the time that I did spend much more impactful. And it's a very subtle change. That's why it might seem a bit ridiculous, but for me, it was a dramatic improvement to how I was able to work. Now, I want to talk about my biggest failure in the project. The thing that I regard as, the thing that I would maybe regret the most, or where I missed the mark the most. Putting together these slides, I thought, I have an easy answer for this. It was buying the Apple developer membership for a year, because I was working through these new technologies, these new frameworks, and Apple makes it easier than ever to build apps. With less code, you can iterate faster. So I thought, I've been working on mobile so long, so why don't I buy a year of the membership and make an app or two? Because I'm carrying so much excitement. Well, as you can imagine, I didn't make any apps. I tried, but as these things go, sometimes they just don't work out because of many reasons, some of them being the chaos and the disorganization of how I work through and covered in those lessons. But that was not the biggest failure, folks. That wasn't even close. My biggest failure in this project was getting lost in this Greenfield project, because we started with this excitement of all the things that we could do, of all the weird quirks and all the improvements and enhancements, and the fact that we're not limited in any way because we're working in Greenfield. That excitement, which then turns into anxiety, because I'm thinking, gosh, people are going to find out how big a fraud I am, or how big of an imposter I am, because I really don't know what I'm doing. Maybe I'm not technical enough. Maybe I'm not coming across confident enough meetings and such. And then I'm overwhelmed. Maybe I'm not thinking I'm doing a good enough job to protect the team, to enable them to work through and protect them from issues. or I'm really disorganized and I'm really chaotic in how I take notes. So maybe I'm not being that strong representative in the team. So then I become this sort of feeling of being lost, being dissociated, because I'm struggling with all these things. I'm overwhelmed and I'm spending more time working into the evenings, and that output's not too great. So effectively, with that extra spending of time and knowing that this isn't a good representation of the value that I can bring, kind of just ruining it for myself, spending that time trying to keep up. So the lessons that I've recapped there that I went through, all of these, and keeping the user in sight, the well-being of yourself and the team, and recognizing where you can apply yourself best, where you're not trying to do absolutely everything. These were certainly the key lessons that come out of it. But whenever you get into this state where you're feeling maybe a bit dissociated, and that excitement and anxiety doesn't really mean as much, because you just feel like I don't think I'm doing too good of a job here, and I'm losing sight of the greenfield potential that we could bring users in this space. Well, that's where you just have to be honest with yourself and be honest with the peers around you, because you're always going to have somebody in your team, maybe not go directly to the junior folks immediately, but those folks above you and your peers, be honest with them and talk it out, because you'd be surprised, the peers that I've spoke to in a tech lead position, how we all feel in a similar way. So getting yourself into gear and delegating responsibilities, and not thinking you need to solve every problem. You don't need to jump on every fire. You can improve the trust and respect among the team and give folks more confidence in their ability by just delegating out some responsibilities, but being honest about how you can be better with your time. And then you can enjoy a unique opportunity without giving too much of yourself over it, that it's untenable, it's unsustainable. So in closing, working on a greenfield project will not go as expected. It will not be comfortable. It will be so challenging in parts, but it will be absolutely worth it. So go build amazing things together. Thank you. If you would like to reach out through the comments or send me messages on any feedback, any thoughts, or anything that you find useful in this presentation, please do so. Thanks very much, folks.